Thank you everybody for coming. This is our March meeting of the New England Herpetological Society. Today we have Jen, and she's presenting for the New England Entomological Society, and she's presenting on mosquitoes. We're going to learn a lot of cool stuff today. If you want to get started, that would be awesome.
I was expecting more like reading stuff, sorry. I didn't know I was going to come right up. First of all, since I'm being videotaped, to clarify, I'm actually here for work.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Not for the Entomological Society, because I do mosquito control work at the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, so just so there's no like ethical violation or whatever, I'm working today and I won't be working on Thursday, so okay. Okay, mosquitoes are too complicated to explain the whole thing to you about what we do in the state and why in an hour, but somehow I'm gonna try. I think the best thing to do is just to go over quickly the life cycle. I hit enter, nothing happened. Let me try that again. Still nothing, hold on. Enter. That's better, okay. Let's quickly go over a generalized mosquito life cycle, just because I think it's going to help you understand like why and where we try to control these things, and how we know to warn people about disease and stuff like that. So an adult female mosquito, females are the only ones that are feeding on blood, not the males. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that male mosquitoes and female mosquitoes are both nectar feeders, so they do benefit from pollinator gardens, ironically enough, if you're planting stuff like that. So a female mosquito, after taking a blood meal to get the resources, and after having mated, will lay eggs either in a raft type formation, which is a whole bunch of eggs stuck together floating on an aquatic surface, or sometimes single eggs in leaf litter, or in a cavity type place, which could be anything from a plant pot in your backyard that's filled with some stinky water to holes in trees and stuff like that. Those eggs will hatch, and the larvae that emerge are aquatic. They have to complete their life cycle in the water until they emerge as adults, and then they're out flying. The larvae go through several different life stages, or instars. I think you probably are, most of you are familiar with that kind of language, where they are living in the water and breathing oxygen through tube in their, at the end of their abdomen. They transform into pupa so that they can then emerge as adults, typically 10 days to 2 weeks later. Once they emerge, then the whole life cycle will begin again. Depending on the species and the time of year, this kind of a life cycle could take anywhere from 10 to 14 days at peak heat in August, to sometimes getting stuck where the larvae are overwintering because the eggs are laid very late in the season. And again, that's going to sort of drive the disease cycles that concern us in the state. And so I thought it would be helpful to talk about, sort of the what and the why of trying to control mosquitoes in Massachusetts. I've seen a lot of misinformation out there that I want to try to correct. I think a lot of people think that if they have that people don't like pesticides being sprayed in general, and I think that they think that the state will just happily get a call and run out to someone's house and start blasting a chemical into the air to get rid of mosquitoes. That is not how it works, for various reasons, the ecology of it and also the economics of it. But in Massachusetts we have this thing that has a horrible name called the State Reclamation and Mosquito Control Board. It was originally a board that was designed to deal with land reclamation, and I'm not even quite sure how mosquito control got folded into it, but it did. And there's a board that's made up of folks from my agency, Agriculture, and also DCR, and also the Department of Environmental Protection. And there's also these mosquito control districts or projects that are scattered throughout the state. I'm going to show you a map so you can see if you're in one or not. A lot of people don't realize they are. Some people think the whole state is, and that's not true for various reasons. Also, because this is in a lot of cases about human illness, the Department of Public Health Okay, so I talked about the 3-member board, the SRD, and I feel like I covered that too. The only time you're gonna really hear from these people, like in the news, is if we have a disease emergency and we're talking about doing an aerial spray of an adulticide. This is some chemical that's gonna kill adult mosquitoes. Okay, it's kind of blah, blah, blah. All right, so the mosquito control districts or projects, unfortunately, some of them like to call themselves districts and some projects, so there's no good acronym for that. They're operating under the authority of that board, but they operate also fairly autonomously. They each have a superintendent. They have their own offices within the geographic location that they're in. They're the ones that are doing mosquito management. They're capturing mosquitoes, sending them to get tested for disease, and applying things like larvicide to kill larvae or adulticide to kill adults, depending on a lot of things, where they're located and how much money they have and what time of year it is and whether there is a perceived problem with mosquitoes at that time. So they're doing surveillance, trapping, treatment, yeah, I covered all that. Water management and source reduction. I think I'm going to talk about that in a few slides. But source reduction basically means they'll help you get rid of places where water is festering, like used tires, recycled tires that are just sitting around in piles that are full of what I call stank water. So, and also the Department of Public Health. So they're the ones that are running the tests on the mosquitoes to verify whether they have virus in them or not. They're also doing a lot of that public communication, which is kind of nice. So if somebody's getting upset that you're planning to do a treatment and they don't want to have chemicals applied in their area, then the DPH takes all the heat from us. Because sometimes no one knows my agency exists most of the time. I'm fine with that now. After 10 years, let them be yelled at. This is a map showing where we have these mosquito control districts in Massachusetts. You will see that the eastern part of the state is fairly covered. Is there anybody here who is not, I mean, looking at this map, you think you're not in one of these mosquito control districts?
I can't tell for sure, but Shirley, Mass, I think is a little bit left.
Oh yeah, I forget if Shirley is in the central Mass. You'll see there's some holes in that green area there. I know Carlisle, for example, declined to participate. But all the towns around them do. So they're probably getting a lot of benefit from that, from the treatment and testing without actually having to pay in to the system. Nantucket was in a mosquito control project and recently removed themselves from it. Nantucket is its own country. Don't care what anybody says. It's not an island. It's a country. So if you see the orange dots that are along I-91, that's the brand new Pioneer Valley Mosquito Control District. Just got approved last year. They're still pulling in member towns. So we haven't put them on the map yet, but I just wanted to show you, because a lot of, especially when you talk to the CDC and you show them a map of Massachusetts, they're very concerned about that white patch in the middle, because it doesn't mean that there's no disease in that area. It just means that nobody is testing for it most of the time, which is not a good thing. Okay, we also have some municipal level mosquito control, so that's cities and towns trying to just do their own thing. And of course, mosquito control by private companies. So you might not be in a mosquito control district, or you might be, and your neighbor might be like, you know, I'm having a party, I don't want mosquitoes in my backyard, I'm gonna pay this company to come and spray. You know, we don't control that. I think a lot of people think we do. We have to make sure that those folks are licensed to legally apply pesticide, and they have to follow the labels on the pesticide, but that kind of treatment has nothing to do with us. Municipal level mosquito control is mostly, it's when a city or town is like, you know, we think we have a mosquito problem, we're not sure, so we're gonna just kind of look at the catch basins in our town. They can get a certification from the state so that they can send municipal employees around to check for mosquito larvae and then apply larvicide to a catch basin or something like that. It's kind of low level. They're not getting disease testing or anything like that. It's usually mostly because they have some kind of a nuisance going on where people aren't willing to go outside at certain times of year because there's this huge influx of biting mosquitoes. Also, if a Board of Health in any town or city can declare a public health emergency and get support from the state if they think that they're having a mosquito problem. And I think I covered the private company. Oh yeah, but so here's some of the things that I shouldn't just say that a private company is going to come and spray, right? They do barrier treatments where they're treating all along the perimeter of your property. A lot of them are using natural options that are of varying effectiveness, usually not quite that effective, and they're trying to sell you on tick control options as well. Okay, so here's what the state-sanctioned mosquito control did over 1 year, and this is 2017 because I'm still processing the numbers from 2018. They collected almost 500,000 mosquitoes, and that's even considering that big white gap in the middle of the state. And then they sent over 150,000 of them for testing at DPH. They also managed over 750,000 feet of habitat for mosquito control, so that's like cleaning of ditches and cleaning out culverts that get blocked, because we're always trying to stop that, that production and sustenance of mosquito habitat, which is typically standing water with like organic material that's causing it to be very acidic and a very hospitable place for mosquitoes to lay their eggs. All right, so why do we care? And maybe some of you don't and still won't care after I talk, but in a lot of places mosquitoes are just a nuisance. Has anybody opted not to go out on a walk or a field trip because you're like, oh my god, the mosquitoes? No? Okay. Does anybody like put repellent on or something if they know it's going to be bad? Okay, we'll talk more about repellents in a while. Sometimes folks, especially in areas where where they've heard that mosquito-borne illness has been there in the past, will avoid outdoor recreation when the mosquito level gets pretty bad. And I'm going to talk a bit about being like more logical about it, because depending on what time of year that you're going out, like maybe if you're just worried about getting a disease and you're not so worried about getting itchy mosquito bites, then you can be kind of smart about what you're doing and when. But the main reason that the state cares is because of mosquito-borne illness. And that is mainly in Massachusetts, West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis, which I'm assuming most of you have already heard of. But for, not quite yet, but probably in the future, especially with climate change making things, fewer freezes and a longer growing season, we are reasonably looking at tropical diseases like dengue fever, chikungunya virus, and Zika virus possibly becoming established here, which I'm going to talk more about why at the end of the talk. Okay, so West Nile virus is something that probably all of you have had and you didn't know, because like 80% of the people that get West Nile virus have no symptoms and just have no idea. We know because states have done like blood bank testing and they can see that West Nile virus is present in people's blood, but they didn't get sick. But 20% of those infected will show like some kind of mild symptoms, like what flu-like symptoms, aches and pains, and maybe a mild fever. There is a small percentage of people that are infected that get like this, what they call this neuroinvasive type of West Nile virus, where they can get like limb paralysis and shakes and like palsy and really bad headache and really high fever. And people have died from this, and even in Massachusetts. In the past, they were saying that this neuroinvasive strain would typically only affect like people with poor immune systems or that were very young or very old. But we are seeing evidence that people that appear perfectly healthy and are just middle age can sometimes get this too. And they don't really understand what's going on. It could be a new strain that somehow has sprouted up or come from another state or another country. But it is something to be concerned about. But I think what people really have fear about, I mean, how many people have heard of Tripoli before? More than half of you. Tripoli is fairly rare, but it can be very deadly, where a third of all the people that get Tripoli will die. And of the 2/3 that survive, a lot of them are going to have brain damage from it. And so it really tends to put the fear into people about mosquitoes when you talk about Tripoli. Symptoms including fever, headache, irritability, drowsiness, vomiting, convulsions, eventually coma. So it's pretty serious, but it is also pretty rare. So here's how these two particular viruses cycle through the environment in our state. Okay, I always think this is funny when I look up a graphic to stick in, because they like to talk about this thing called dead end host, which always just makes me feel like it's somebody that's like worthless because they're a dead end host. But the way it works is that birds are driving the West Nile virus transmission cycle in our state. Birds get infected, and versus a human or a horse, the virus amplifies inside the bird's body before, so that there's so much of it that when a mosquito bites them, they haven't died. The birds are mostly gonna survive, but any mosquito that bites them will be infected with a ton of West Nile virus, and then they can bite humans. So with West Nile virus, that's gonna be mainly Culex mosquitoes, which is things like Culex pipiens and restuans, things that live in like catch basins and woodland pools and all over the place, but are really commonly found in more like urban and suburban areas. So a lot of times when you see a West Nile virus outbreak, you'll see it's focused in Boston around the 128 belt versus Tripoli, which we're going to talk about in a few more slides. So birds, particularly migratory birds, songbirds, you see the robin there. It's like a house next or something. But anyway, mosquitoes that carry West Nile virus are biting birds, and that virus will build and build and build in them. If they bite a horse and the horse hasn't been vaccinated, that horse is probably going to die. But horses don't reproduce, the virus doesn't reproduce inside horses to a degree that a mosquito that bites a horse is going to pick up West Nile and carry it on to another animal, which is why we call them a dead-end host. So this poor lady who's gardening in this picture is also a dead-end host. So you're not going to get West Nile virus because somebody that you work with has West Nile virus. It doesn't work like that. You'd have to both be, I guess, doing the work in the same, I don't know, songbird sanctuary every single day. That's how you're going to get West Nile virus. So again, the Culex species that are carrying this are things that are like the northern house mosquito and the white dotted mosquito. We tend to call them catch basin mosquitoes because that's where they're finding them. They're dipping cups into the catch basins along the side of a road and pulling up the larvae and identifying them, and they're almost always Culex. Culex almost always bites birds, but will sometimes bite other animals and humans. And the interesting thing is that it's not till the end of the season that you're going to start seeing people get West Nile virus. And I'll show you a chart that proves that, because that's how long it takes for the virus level to ramp up in the birds to be so high that every mosquito that's biting a bird, and then like that 10% that are biting humans, are able to pass on West Nile to humans and to horses. All right, so this is a map showing you every place where we found mosquitoes that tested positive for West Nile virus. This is not human cases. This is just what they call positive mosquito pools. I didn't have time to make a separate map just for West Nile, so just kind of ignore the Tripoli thing for now. And basically, the deeper the red, as the red comes in, think of it like blood, right? That's even more positives there. And you'll see in the next map that the dark colors, the more mosquitoes that are found positive, it will correspond to more human cases of West Nile virus. And so you see that whole area, it's like suburban, greater Boston area, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, but you can see that that's a hot spot for 2017, fairly consistent every single year, that same area. But you see that in 2017, it was showing up in Bristol and Plymouth County, and also you'll see that stripe. I guess I'm gonna get into the shot for a second, which is embarrassing, but anyway, you notice that there's a stripe down there. That doesn't mean that all that means is that that's the only places they were testing. And again, that's that subset of towns that are in in that new Pioneer Valley Mosquito Control District. So if we're getting, burgundy colors on just those few towns, and I'm sure the towns around them are also seeing a lot of it too. This is a map showing you all of the West Nile virus human cases over the past 10 years. And again, Middlesex County getting hit pretty hard. Suffolk County is also up there a lot. It's found throughout, right? But just 1 or 2 cases in Berkshire County. And these are cases that were so bad that people were at a hospital and got their blood tested. There have to be, hundreds more people that are getting West Nile every year and just have no idea because they didn't get that sick and didn't seek medical attention. All right, now let's look at the same thing but for Tripoli. And here's where the snake thing comes in. So we'll get us up in the middle of the talk. Again, we have this epizootic cycle between mosquitoes and birds, where mosquitoes are biting birds most of the year and constantly infecting the mosquitoes and then reinfecting the birds, and the birds are building up more and more Eastern equine encephalitis virus inside their bloodstream. And eventually, when these mosquitoes occasionally bite other animals, then the Tripoli virus gets passed on from birds to mammals and also sometimes to reptiles, but very rarely. So the way this works is a little bit more complicated for Tripoli than it was for West Nile virus. So we have this one particular mosquito, Kela Eleonora, that is almost exclusively a bird biter. And so that's the one that's going to be helping ramp up the virus levels in the birds. But we have species like this. Actually, I should have put it on the map. I don't know why they didn't put it on here, but there's another species of mosquito, Coquilitidia perturbans, that is considered what they call a bridge vector. So it will bite birds, but also bite humans. So Kela Eleonora is needed to get the virus levels up. But eventually, once the virus levels are up, the Coquilitidia is going to be biting birds and then biting mammals and potentially herps, and then spreading the virus to other types of animals. And again, you have it's such a weird clip art, right? The dead end host. Now you got this woman with this weird hair ponytail thing going on. She looks like a dead end host, right? So again, a horse or a human can get Eastern equine encephalitis, but they can't pass it on in any way to other humans or horses. All right. So there was an interesting study that was making the rounds back in 2012. Maybe some of you guys heard this. They wanted to know, they still don't quite understand how we get Tripoli every year, because these are typically migratory birds that are getting bit and they're leaving, and they don't have very long lives either. And so how is Tripoli showing up? It's the mosquitoes are dying at the end of the season, so it's not like they're carrying them on. And Tripoli is not what they call a virus that can go through vertical transmission. So it's not passed from egg to larva to adult. The adults have to get it by biting and feeding on blood that's infected. And one of the things they did was survey a whole ton of amphibians and reptiles to look at what they call host competency, which is not the same as showing that in the wild they can spread Tripoli, but they just want to see, like, if we infect them with Tripoli virus, will they carry it in their blood? Will it amplify to the point where if a mosquito bites them, they can carry it on? They haven't found any amphibians that that's true for, but they did a study that showed that both copperheads and cottonmouth snakes will carry Tripoli. And so what they're thinking is going on is that at the end of the growing season, when birds are migrating away and there's not much to feed on, Kela Eleonora might be feeding on snakes. And then the snakes have Tripoli in their blood and have been shown to be able to amplify it to the point where a mosquito that feeds on an infected snake is getting the virus. So, thanks guys. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, it's thought that snakes are carrying the virus in their blood over the winter and serving as a source of Tripoli when the new mosquitoes hatch in the spring. So I thought that was interesting. All right, so again, on the left we have Kela Eleonora. This is the bird-biting mosquito that is feeding that Tripoli virus amplification. The females of Kela Eleonora really like acidic water, and they thrive in cedar and red maple swamps. So whenever I see you guys talking about Hockomock Swamp in like August, I'm always like, oh guys, be careful. It's really bad. So one of the places where you typically find Kela Eleonora is in does anybody know what a crypt is? So you're like walking in Hockomock Swamp or something, and you're like going up and down as you step, and you get to some big tree, and the tree, it looks healthy, but like under the roots of the tree are these holes, and they are filled with nasty, nasty water that Kela loves. So that's one of the places to find Kela Eleonora. It's also one of the reasons why it's really hard to treat for Kela Eleonora, because if you know that you have a pond or a stream, the edge of a stream that has a mosquito infestation, then you can get in there and spray. If you want to try to treat, maybe apply a larvicide to the water so that you can kill all the Kela Eleonora. You can't just broadcast it. You have to be walking through, and every time there's a hole, you have to sprinkle the larvicide in, and they just can't seem to do that effectively. There's just too much real estate in these swamps where you would have to treat to actually decimate the populations. They haven't been able to do much about it. The other species, again, Cocolithidia perturbans, really interesting to me because it lives in freshwater, and the larva and the pupa, when they're in that aquatic phase of their life cycle, they attach to the underground roots and stems of aquatic plants. Like they call it the cattail mosquitoes. The cattail is just one example. So basically, they need oxygen. The way they get it is they jam the end of their abdomen into the stem, and there's air in there, and they're breathing from that. So they need that like flowing water instead of that stagnant water to survive. And these are the ones that are the bridge vectors. So they feed on birds, but they also feed on mammals. So once there's enough Tripoli around, they're going to be catching it and giving it to rabbits, humans, horses, things like that. Okay, so here's Tripoli activity in Massachusetts in 2008. The main thing to take away from this is there's very little on the map, right? For the past few years, we've had a dearth of Tripoli activity. We're not even finding very many mosquitoes that have it in their blood, which is fine with us for now. The last big outbreak of Tripoli was back in 2012. That is the last time we did an aerial application of mosquito adulticide to knock them back because we were hitting really high levels of disease. But we really only have these 4 hits for Tripoli, 2 mosquitoes, a horse in East Brookfield, and then a turkey in Hubbardston, the same place that the mosquito was. It's been like this since the drought hit a few years ago because those crypts really dried out. So as bad as the drought was for the state, it was really good for folks doing mosquito control. This is a map showing you human cases of Tripoli from 2004 to 2014. And the reason it doesn't go beyond 2014 is because we haven't had any human cases since then, which is great. But you'll notice, again, we know where the hot spots are. They are in the swampy areas in Bristol and Plymouth County, some parts of Norfolk, some parts of the northeastern part of the state. But again, that whole, Hockomock Swamp, it borders both Bristol and Plymouth County. If you're out there looking for cool amphibians and reptiles, maybe just keep an eye on what the Department of Health is saying about Tripoli levels. Okay, so here's a chart showing you the number of both West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis cases in humans by month of disease onset. So here's where you get some information that can help you understand better. Like, you don't have to be freaked out all the time that if you live in an area or go herping in an area that has lots of Tripoli, that you're going to get it. I don't think anything scares you guys anyway, but let's say, your family is nervous about it. Notice what's going on here. You're seeing August and September. And that's because at the beginning of the season, there's just not enough virus around, even if you get bit by a mosquito that is able to carry Tripoli or West Nile virus, it doesn't have enough virus in it to transmit it to you. That's not going to happen typically until August or September. And then the reason it's ramping down in October and November is because It's getting colder and mosquitoes aren't as active, or they're dead. Okay, so you already said this kind of stuff isn't going to stop you from going outdoors, which is good. So let's talk about ways that you can protect yourself and the environment you're in from mosquitoes. The public health way of talking about this is to call it personal protection, which is weird to me, but I haven't found a better way to talk about it. Basically, there is clothing you can wear, repellents you can use, and you can be smart about your, when you're going outdoors and where, to prevent yourself from getting a mosquito-borne illness. So with clothing, this maybe is going to seem, oh, these slides look terrible. I know, right? You can buy one of those on Amazon. They look so happy, right? Anyway. I have something like that, but it's just for one person, and it's like an oven, which is weird because it's mesh, but you will bake in that thing. So a lot of people don't find that netting really works for them, but if you're working in a known mosquito habitat, you might want to think about like getting one of those hats that tucks in so they're not attacking you there. And I'll talk about like ways you can treat your clothes and stuff. Loose fitting clothing is actually the way that you want to go. If you are outside with your fancy Fabletics leggings or whatever, tight lycra clothing is gonna be right form-fitting against your clothing, and a mosquito is just gonna bite right through. Loose is the way to go, so that if they are trying to land on you, then they're not able to get through. Thick denim and stuff like that is also good versus thinner material. Always try to keep your ankles and your feet covered, because there are certain species that are out there that can carry illness. They're called ankle biters that will go after that area. So don't be out there in flip-flops. Like basically, if I'm going to be going into a wetland area, I'm going to be wearing long sleeves and long pants, even if I'm miserably sweating from it, because I don't want to get bit. That's just what we advise. Again, fabric with a tighter weave. So nylons versus knits, and again, that fabulous looking netting. All right, so in terms of clothing, there is something called permethrin that folks have been using. I'm going to talk about the whole spray your body thing in another slide, I think. Yeah, in another slide. But you can treat your clothing. So if you know that you're going to be going out every day and you kind of got that field outfit, you can do a treatment, you can wash it, and it lasts for like 7 to 10 washes. If you have a favorite outfit, you can even send it to another company that will do it for you and send it back. Two things about permethrin. The first is that it's toxic to cats, not to dogs, just to cats. It's thought to be fine when it's dry, but you don't want to be treating permethrin in an area where, you're treating clothing with permethrin in an area where a cat could be exposed to it. The other thing is that if you know you're going to a place where you're going to be like wading, or it's going to be really wet, you don't want to re-wet clothing in like a wetland area with the permethrin in it. It could have a toxic impact on amphibians. So this might not work for you in all situations, but you could treat your shirt if you want to do that. A lot of people would rather treat their clothing than to apply things to their skin. And permethrin has been shown to be very effective against both mosquitoes and ticks. All right, so repellents are typically applied to skin, although some of them you can put right on your clothing. Everybody's probably familiar with DEET. I think I've been using it since I was a kid. There's also picaridin, something that needs a good trade name that they call IR3535, and oil of lemon eucalyptus, which are of varying effectiveness. So here is a chart where scientists tested how effective these various things are on keeping mosquitoes away, both right when you apply it and then after 4 hours. And you can see, and it can be hard because you go to the store and there's like a whole wall of this stuff, and even stuff from the same company is going to have different percentages of active ingredients and is going to be different effectiveness. But you'll see that again, that DEET is going to get the job done. So if you're able to wear DEET and you're comfortable wearing DEET, it does repel. It continues to repel even after 4 hours. When I use it, I find that it is keeping mosquitoes off of me, and so I'm pretty happy with that. I tend to not like the way it feels on my skin or the way it smells, and I can't seem to avoid getting it into my mouth no matter what I do when I'm spraying it, but the dry one works well for me. I don't know, it still smells really bad, but it does it. But even some of these things, including a really horribly named perfume from Victoria's Secret called Bombshell. So you will see that urban legend stuff go around every once in a while about how such and such will prevent this if you use it, like Skin So Soft from Avon and stuff like that. Well, Victoria's Secret Bombshell, for some reason, was doing a better job after being on for 4 hours on humans than EcoSmart Organic Insect Repellent. Would I want the people I'm working with in the field to smell like Victoria's Secret Bombshell? No, but maybe that works for you. I don't know. So again, here's the same chart, but then they pulled in some of that like Urban Myths products and also some of the natural stuff. And you'll just see, again, Deepwood's off, doing really well. The one that is 98% DEET Repel brand also does really well at repelling insects. But, a skin patch I think they got online didn't work. No repellent at all. Again, you're going to get the same effect with no repellent as you will with EcoSmart Organic Insect Repellent. What doesn't work is a lot of the products that are listed as natural. So oil of lemon eucalyptus is effective, but not as effective as something like DEET or picaridin. But lemongrass, citronella, peppermint, rosemary, all that natural stuff, it might smell really good. It is not going to impact whether mosquitoes bite you or not. Also, that meme that's going around on Facebook where they say you just have to put a pot of lemongrass on your porch and then you won't get mosquitoes is not true at all. It drives me crazy. Those fan clips that blow the chemical they're actually of limited effectiveness. So they're not the worst thing, but they tend to basically, like if you have a fan clip on your belt and it's blowing, that's really good for around here. It's not so good for around here. So I personally wouldn't use something like that, but it's not completely ineffective. That thing about bats, I'm going to talk about that for a couple of slides. I think I'm doing okay with time. Nobody's telling me to shut up and stop talking. Okay, here's the thing about bats. Bats are really cute, but they do not perform mosquito control. At least I think bats are cute. I tried really hard to get a picture of a bat eating fruit like in a blanket, but there weren't any free, like non-copyrighted images, so I decided just to find that little guy from. He's cute, right? Okay, bat myth number 1. You've probably seen it on social media. One bat will eat 600 mosquitoes in an hour. I've seen this at 600, 1,000, and 1,200. And therefore, if you let the bat go all night, it will eat 12,000 mosquitoes. This came from a study where they put a bat in a box and gave it nothing but mosquitoes to see how many it would eat. And that's about how much it would eat. I don't even know which one of those numbers it is. It doesn't matter. In the wild, a bat is not going to preferentially go after mosquitoes. It's going to eat a wide variety of insects, and it's not going to drop mosquito populations. The other thing that was recently going around that really steamed me is this post from some bat organization about how if you just put bat houses out that you can cure disease. So that comes from this really old story about a doctor in San Antonio who claimed to have eradicated malaria from that part of Texas using his giant bat houses. Okay, so he needed homes for bats, and there were probably more bats around because they were able to roost in these kind of cool looking structures. But people were myth-busting this back in the early 1900s, which I think is really cool. So when I saw this story, I could tell that it was urban legend material, and I started to do some background research, and I found this study from 1911 where scientists were like, this guy said he got rid of malaria in San Antonio, and that doesn't make any sense. How could he have done that with just bat houses? And so they went out to the sites, and they took guano samples, and they found no evidence of any mosquito parts in any of the guano. So the bats weren't eating mosquitoes. The other thing they looked at is the mosquitoes that were causing malaria in that area are genus Anopheles, which live very low in vegetation. And the bat species that was there that he was making these roosts for feeds far above vegetation. So of course they weren't eating mosquitoes. Okay, so in terms of trying to deal with, not getting bit by mosquitoes, right? We know that bats aren't gonna save us. So what else do you wanna do besides just, grabbing a bottle of something or encasing your body in mosquito netting? You wanna pay attention to what time of day it is. So mosquitoes are typically most active at dawn or dusk. And in a lot of swampy areas, you actually feel that pressure come on if you're there when it starts to get dark. We were down at Miles Standish with the New England Entomological Society doing some black lighting at night, and it's just, you come in to set up the equipment, it starts to get dark, the mosquitoes are like, oh my god, and they will not leave you alone for like half an hour, and then when it gets dark, they're just gone, right? So maybe you want to choose when you're doing activities and not be out in an area that has mosquitoes when the sun's going down or when the sun's coming up. Most, but not all mosquitoes are going to be biting then. Some species are so aggressive that they'll even follow you indoors. So be careful about, not leaving doors and windows wide open. Make sure your screens are tight, don't have holes in them. But another thing to keep in mind is that tidal cycles will drive mosquito activity if you're in or near a salt marsh area. So when there is a lunar cycle that is causing, basically high tide is going to flood a whole bunch more area, then that water kind of pulls back, except all the little pits where mosquitoes are going to be like, oh, this is great, after a few days it's all stagnant. So you'll see that a lot of mosquito control districts on the East Coast are prepping for that. They're following the lunar cycle, and when the high tide comes in, they're going out right after that and doing a larvicide treatment in all those areas that they know are going to be infused with mosquito eggs and prevent them from being a big population boom of mosquitoes. So again, it's like, all right, are there going to be a lot of mosquitoes in this area? You can, if you're in a salt marsh area, check the tidal cycle and you can correlate it to that. The other thing is that if it's really cold out or if the temperature really drops at night, there's going to be less mosquito activity. Overcast days might be more mosquito activity because it kind of feels like dusk or dawn to them. And any kind of a rain or flood event is going to be a boon for certain species of mosquitoes. Again, it's mostly genus Anopheles that are floodwater mosquitoes. So you'll sometimes see outbreak of disease in years where we have a lot of rain events. Certain mosquitoes are active at different times of the year. And again, just a reminder that you're very unlikely to get West Nile or Tripoli in the spring, even though you are pretty likely to get bit by a spring mosquito. I think those are Oculoritatus canadensis. So they're around and they're going to be a huge nuisance, but they're not likely to impart any disease that we know of at this time. Again, damp, shady locations. You probably know this. You're out in the woods, you're in a shady area, it's kind of moist, there's a lot of leaf litter. All of a sudden, mosquitoes are coming out and they want to bite you. And just another reminder, again, I talked about this before, but West Nile virus tends to be more common in urban areas because the mosquitoes that carry it are living in catch basins, whereas Tripoli has been linked to cedar swamps and red maple swamps that have those crypts under the trees that get filled with stagnant water. Okay, some of the other stuff you guys, oh yeah, go ahead.
I remember when I was a kid, our parents used to give us these little black boxes. They put a 9-volt battery in and it was supposed to ward off mosquitoes because it made a sound that was like a dragonfly or something, or some sort of ultrasonic thing.
Yes.
I assume those.
I've never seen
effectiveness of
any evidence that an auditory signal impacts mosquitoes at all.
Alright.
The only thing I've ever seen that does it is the machines that mimic humans and pump out carbon dioxide. But even then, I mean, mosquito control districts are doing their own surveillance. And a lot of ways that they do it is they put out something that pumps out CO2. But they don't just do that, they have this packet, I think it emits lactase or something, but basically it's a lure that's meant to mimic humans, but it's not just the carbon dioxide, it's also other things that are emitted by humans that, I don't know, it doesn't stink, but it's very attractive to mosquitoes. And that's pretty much it in terms of getting them to yeah, you can't scare mosquitoes away by screaming at a really high pitch. So. All right, so some of the stuff you can do in your own yards is identify potential larval mosquito habitat. Somebody was telling me that he was raising mosquitoes inside his house earlier. Maybe not a good idea. I suppose you're not going to get a disease from them, but maybe want to keep the screen tight on something like that. Anyway, here, all of these are potential mosquito larval habitats. Any kind of standing water, ditches and puddles, any flooded area, catch basins, retention ponds, which are sometimes called detention ponds, although they're basically the same thing, cattail marshes, woodland pools, which includes vernal pools, cedar and red maple swamps, wet leaves and debris. I forget if I have this here. Okay, so here's more artificial habitat. All of you probably have this in your yard, whether you realize it or not. So equipment or machinery, is there some kind of tractor equipment where the bucket is sitting up like this and it's filling with water? Unused plant pots, old tires, bird baths, kiddie pools, and abandoned swimming pools. The housing crisis back in, was it 2008? Feels like a really long time ago. People are going bankrupt and abandoning their houses, and these were middle class people that had above ground and in-ground pools. And boards of health were calling our mosquito control districts, and they were finding, 100,000 mosquito larvae in a swimming pool that had just been sitting there for like a year with nobody servicing it. So if you can tip it over or drain it, please do that. Don't leave your those kiddie pools out there. There are some container mosquitoes that can breed in a bottle cap size amount of water, so don't leave the garbage around in your yard. Also, in terms, if you have a dog, you don't want your dog drinking. It's something that can have mosquito larvae. You could be, especially if you're not being good about doing the heartworm treatments, because that's really picking that up. So here are all containers that I've been doing this thing called Tip It Tuesday, where I've been trying to use Twitter to convince people that once a week you should go around and check for standing water in your yard and dump it. Even though probably no one is seeing this, and in general it's been really hard to nobody's really done an experiment. No one has successfully reduced mosquito larval habitat in an urban or suburban area by educating people about keeping standing water out of their yards, because they just don't do it as hard as we try. The suburbs are especially bad about that. So we've got, I actually sometimes use Mosquito Dunks in if I have an area of standing water that I know I can't control. Like I used to have a rain barrel at my old house, and I would put a mosquito dunk in it. It's a biological. It's a bacteria that that gets into the gut of the mosquito and doesn't let them complete their life cycle. So it's fairly specific to mosquitoes and black flies. So if you really have, you really feel like you need to have that bird bath in your yard, maybe consider putting a mosquito dunk in there or aerating it. So not having it be stagnant can help, or dump it every week and refill it. Otherwise you're basically saying, here birds, come to right where the mosquitoes are, get bit and get some virus going. Okay. I feel like I'm talking about that. Gutters are another place, because gutters are filling with leaves. Leaves are acidifying the water. That is perfect mosquito habitat. So keep the gutters clean. I should be telling myself this because my gutters are a mess right now. If you find a really large mosquito-infested area and you're you might want to consider reporting it to the Mosquito Control District so that they can go out and do a treatment just to the water to kill all the mosquito larvae. Especially if you're seeing an abandoned swimming pool. They can be discreet about it, so if it's just that your neighbor's still living at the house but is not taking care of their pool, then you might just want to call it in. I feel like I already talked about all those things. Okay. So I think it's important to know whether you live in a mosquito control district or not, not just because it's going to help you know whether there's disease, mosquito-borne illness in your town or city, but also because if you're concerned about something like pesticide applications and you connect with these groups, they will let you know. They have Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, so when they're spraying, they let you know. The old school way of doing it, and they're still doing this, is they put a public notice in the newspaper or something. I haven't gotten a newspaper for 10 years, but pretty much every single mosquito control district has either a Twitter account or a Facebook account, or you can sign up for email notifications if that's of concern to you. Also, go to mosquitoresults.com and you can see the West Nile and Tripoli risk levels for the entire state as of that time for the entire season. I think I got this there. Yes, so this was, I think, 2017 in October, and you can see we had some moderate levels of risk throughout the state. Last year we had high risk in a lot of areas. Has to get to like orange and red before they start doing things like canceling evening Little League games and stuff like that. But you want to keep an eye on it. Okay, I think, I don't know, how long did you want me to go for? I can keep talking and talk about Asian tiger mosquito, or I can end here. We've got like 10 minutes.
It's entirely up to you. I mean, I'm fine with
Okay.
continuing.
I mean, I do want to talk about Asian tiger mosquito because we didn't have Asian tiger mosquito like 10, 15 years ago in our state, and it's thought of as mostly a tropical species that wouldn't be able to survive here, but yeah, we've got it now. And that's why we talk about things like dengue and Zika virus and chikungunya virus, and it's not just something that happens like in the Caribbean. Asian tiger mosquito is a container breeder and has been shipped all over the world in recycled tires and is breeding at tire dumps. It's capable of carrying all of those different diseases and also Eastern equine and West Nile virus. This is a map showing every place where we found Asian tiger mosquito, and you can see that it has been showing up in New England more now than like in the past 20 or 30 years. It was first discovered in 2009 in Massachusetts in New Bedford. New Bedford is basically, it's like a port area. They have a giant tire recycling company. They have tons of shipping containers coming in and out. Talk about mosquito breeding habitat. You know, you've got a shipping container and the top dips in so that you can stack them. And that is, once it rains or snows, snow melt, whatever, that is perfect mosquito breeding ground. It goes stagnant in a very short time, it gets heated up, and the mosquitoes breed like crazy in there. So it was probably brought in the contaminated tires and then has spread from the Bedford area to surrounding towns through the use of this other type of like container habitat. In 2016, they found it around New Bedford, across the water in Wareham. In 2017, it was found in Worcester at a container storage area. Again, Worcester is kind of like a port. You know, it's not on the water, but there's airports bringing stuff in and out. There's all kinds of refrigerated containers, and they're being stored. There's a major train depot there. It's been found in Lowell, another city, but it's also been found in Mattapoisett. It's even been found in Northampton. So at this point, we're feeling more like we're not finding it in other places because we haven't been able to sample there. This is a map showing every place it's found. The orange is just to show you New Bedford, and you can see how it's been spreading from New Bedford, but at the same time, we are finding it in all these other areas, in the Boston area, up in Lowell, even way down on the Cape. So it's definitely showing up. Now the question is it showing up occasionally in tires, or is it established here? They're finding it overwintering in Worcester and also down in Bristol County. So we're thinking that yes, it is established here in some areas. This is a fairly colorful mosquito that you can often recognize by sight. It's fairly small compared to other mosquitoes, and it's black with black and white stripy legs and that bright white stripe right down the middle of its head. It's not the only mosquito that has stripes on it, but when you see it versus the other species, it really just looks like it was painted white. It overwinters in the egg stage, and they thought that it would get so cold that the eggs would freeze, but it turns out that if the mosquito is laying eggs and it's in a stack of tires like this, and maybe it's in the tire that's towards the ground, that's plenty of insulation so that even with that polar vortex that happened, they did studies and found that the temperature, you can just put a little temperature gauge down there for the whole winter, temperature never got low enough to kill off the eggs in the tires that were really buried. So one tire out on the ground, yes, it's going to get too cold and the eggs are going to freeze and they won't survive. But, I mean, giant tire piles, they're not going to be affected by that. let's see, can reproduce in very tiny volumes of water. You know, water in a bromeliad is enough for them to breed in there, like bottle cap size amounts of water. And the other thing about this species that makes it different and a potential real danger is that it is a very aggressive day biter. So this isn't a dusk and dawn thing. They will be out all day long trying to find hosts. It's been shown to carry Zika virus, chikungunya virus, and dengue fever. Zika and chikungunya, we both had recent, you might have heard about them in the news, a little bit of hysteria associated with them. We were very concerned that both Zika and chikungunya could have established here, but it didn't because the mosquitoes that carry it weren't here. But that is changing now, because if we get established populations of Asian tiger mosquito correlated in an area with people that are, say, coming from some of the hot spots where chikungunya was showing up, like the Caribbean islands, then you could potentially create a situation where Asian tiger mosquito is picking this up and is now transmitting it locally. Has not been found yet anywhere near Massachusetts, but the potential is there, and these outbreaks are going to keep happening. So this is an example of what a tire pile is going to look like, just so that you get the height of what we're talking about. The state's been doing a lot of outreach to businesses that are doing tire recycling. Bristol County Mosquito Control has been working directly with the big tire recycler in the New Bedford area and has been doing some treatments of the tires to try to knock back populations, and they did see a decrease in populations this past summer. I mean, the things you want to do about Asian tiger mosquito are pretty much like you would want to do about anything. You don't want to have standing water around, and you want to report large standing water sources to mosquito control, especially if you're in like the New Bedford area, the Worcester area. And now we're talking about applying repellent even during the day if you're seeing that kind of activity. So some take-home lessons, be smart about choosing when and how to be outdoors. And if you are choosing to be outdoors in a place or a time when mosquitoes are going to be active and there's a concern that you could have disease from mosquitoes, then you want to make sure to be wearing repellent or wearing the right kind of clothing. And you should be paying attention to the DPH website so that you know if there's like a public health crisis, then you might want to opt to go to a different location for your outdoor activities. If you need to avoid someplace like, I don't know, Honking Swamp sometime. But just, stay informed. I'm not saying be fearful all the time. But it makes sense to, not walk into a hot zone if you can avoid it. Let's see. The last thing I want to do is something totally not related to mosquitoes, because we found something called spotted lanternfly in Massachusetts a couple months ago. I'm going to take a moment to pass this box around, and I can put it in front of the camera at the end if you want, or now. But anyway, please take a look at this insect. If you have seen it, please let us know.